Hey there, this is your pal Pallie, and welcome back to Overrated. This is episode number 6. What am I going to do when I get to 12? And today we're going to be talking about how you evaluate tanks. So, if the tank dies, it's the healer's fault, right? If the healers die, it's the tank's fault, and I don't know. We'll figure out how that works later, but today we're going to be talking about how you evaluate whether your tank's doing good or bad, or how you can help you out your tank. Or if you are a tank, here's some helpful tips on to how to look at your performance. So, we'll talk about World of Logs, because that's always a good place to start. We'll talk about talking to your healers, because they're valuable, they're healing you. Better figure that out. And we'll talk about some like intangible tank evaluations and how to say whether they're a good tank or not. Maybe a little fuzzy, let's say. So first up is the easy one. Let's talk World of Logs. So a few episodes back, I talked about how you evaluate DPS with logs and such, or at least a little bit. Same stuff applies if you want to go back and see what's up with World of Logs. Go back a few episodes and check out that. But it's really good to look at World of Logs for tanks because you can get a lot of good information about their cooldown usage and what they're doing. And when you're evaluating a tank, you're evaluating for, DPS is one of those things that you can evaluate, but you really want to know how hard is this tank to heal, how well are they using their active mitigation, are they using a lot of their cooldowns, or are they simply just sort of standing there keeping hold of the boss? Because you can get a tank that sits in front of the boss, keeps him pointed the right way, does all the stuff, but it may be really hard to heal. Or you may get the opposite. This tank takes no damage, but things are out of control. So the easy part is to look at how hard are they to heal in terms of cooldowns and in terms of stuff you can track with World of Logs. So let's get into it. So let's take a look at World of Logs, and I've got a couple of them here from different tanks, and certainly different tanks, different classes of tanks are going to be evaluated differently. So here I've got a Paladin, we're going to have a Decay and a Warrior here coming up, but I know Paladin's I'm okay. I was tanking Throne of Thunder for most of it and before that, so I can give a good sense of some tanking stuff here. I'm not up on everything, but I know enough to know what to look at in World of Logs. And if you don't know what to look for, find a tank expert that does know. So, for the Warrior stuff, I was talking to our good buddy Agathon, and for DK stuff, I know who to go to for that. So if you need help figuring out what to look for, just ask. You got to find out who to ask for, or you need to do some serious research to find it yourself. So for Paladin tanks, first you want to look at sort of their active mitigation. Well, for all of them, you want to look at active mitigation. So for Paladins, that's Shield of the Righteous. So right here, I have pulled up my buddy Davidus, the core. He's now transferred off. Played with him for a while. Anyway, he's got Shield of the Righteous. That is the active mitigation, and you should see a pretty good uptime percentage for that. So uptime on that for him for this particular fight, Fallen Protectors, 25-man heroic, was 55%. It's going to vary depending on the fights. Paladins can spend their holy power on active mitigation or active healing. So as well, he's got some Eternal Flame uptime too, where he spent time healing himself, healing others, whatever. So, but you should see this Shield of the Righteous figure, I don't know, maybe between 40 and 60%. That's how you know sort of they're at least actively trying to be easier to heal. Shield of the Righteous basically, you can read the tooltip, or if you know, basically reduces the damage you take for 3 seconds and gives you some stacks and stuff. But basically, it means take less damage. Done. That's the active mitigation that Blizzard wants to go for with tanks. So that's active mitigation. So we also want to look at when did they use, or how often did they use their minor cooldowns and major cooldowns? So one of the minor cooldowns for Paladins is Divine Protection. Reduces magical damage by 40%. You can glyph it to make it reduce damage, physical damage and magical damage, but only by 20%. But anyway, it's a 1 minute cooldown, although you can get it lower with some of the new trinkets in Siege. But anyway, Divine Protection is sort of one of those things you want to use quite often, and so, this fight is, how long is this fight? I didn't actually look ahead of time. Bad me. But anywho, this fight is 6 minutes, it's right at the top. 7 minutes long. So a 1 minute cooldown should be at least used close to 7 times. Of course, like I said, you can have the cooldown reduction by the trinkets and Siege and other things. So he used it 9 times across the fight. So it seemed like he was using it, pretty well on. Maybe there's a big gap here where maybe there wasn't a reason to use that. But anywho, you should see a regular use of minor cooldowns to get through the fight. So that's minor cooldowns. And those are going to, again, be different between different tanks. You'll have to look at what's what. But then we get into major cooldowns. So the major cooldowns for Paladins is, oops, that's not the right one. The right one would be the Guardian of the Ancient Kings, which I don't see here. Well, isn't that just embarrassing? For me or him, I don't know. Now, it may actually be something that I'm not seeing. Anywho, you get the point, though. If you don't see one of those big cooldowns, one of those things in here, then they didn't use their 3 minute major cooldown reduction. And again, if it's a 3 minute CD, 7 minute fight, you should see it at least 2 times. And, one of those things for tanks that's weird is tanks really feel like, oh crap, I'm at 20% health, I need to hit my major cooldowns. But the really good tanks sort of plan ahead and go, I know this big hit on Fallen Protectors is about to come. Here's a Calamity. I'm about to get hit with Vengeful Strikes. This is the time for me to use my cooldown so that the healers don't have to worry about me anymore. And that's one of those things that you're not going to get unless you seriously dig into the logs and get to how much damage was taken in and what times and all that other jazz. You're not going to notice that until you start talking to your healers. So we'll get into that soon enough, but just look at these, nice, fun stats and stuff in World of Logs, and you'll get a sense of what's going on for your tanks. So that is Paladins. Decays are another fun one. So here's a log from Shaw of Pride, a almost 7 minute kill as well, and for a Decay Necrolus. And you really want to look at for Decays, they do have Bone Shield, which is something that they should generally have up quite a bit. It's their 1 minute CD and reduces damage taken by 20%. So depending on how many charges, you can gain charges, whatever. There should be a fairly high uptime for Bone Shield. There should be just, little blips where it might drop off depending on how much damage is incoming. It'll depend on the fight, And in this fight, we're talking Shaw of Pride, where the tanks are swapping in and out, tanking the boss. So this is probably one of those where it should be 100% on Bone Shield. And, well, it wasn't quite 100%. Big gap here where Bone Shield wasn't there. Don't know what that might have been, but, whatever. But what's more... So that's the minor cooldown stuff. The active mitigation I have here, which is Blood Shield, so whatever uptime on that, 70% uptime on that. So generally would seem good. Should probably be able to keep it up for the most part. What happened in this gap that was going on? Anyway, you get the point. But sort of other major cooldowns, like Icebound Fortitude, depending on whether he glyphed it or not, is a 3 minute cooldown. There's a glyph to make it 2 minutes and some other stuff. But anywho, This is the one where you should see this, again, 7-minute fight, 3-minute cooldown. Should see it 2 times. Maybe squeeze in that 3rd time. No, it'd be tight. But anywho, you should see it twice, which we do. We see it twice. And decays are ones that have a lot of different cooldowns, a lot of different things they can do. So this one you're going to have to go really digging into what's what and what, you know, are they pressing all their buttons, because there's a lot of them, like Dancing Rune Weapon's another one that's, you know, granting a bunch of parry, so, and that's a pretty short cooldown as far as I remember. You know, Anti-Magic Shell is a 45-second cooldown, but that's all about absorbing magic damage, and maybe there really isn't magic damage in a fight. So like Shout of Pride there is with the Swelling Pride, so you should see, you know, if there were, usually in our 10-man kills we get 4 or 5 Swelling Prides, which is a big burst of magical damage. So we should see probably 5 Anti-Magic Shells coinciding with those hits, but maybe he's got something else. Maybe he's got Icebound Fortitude up at the same time, so it really didn't make sense for him to use it. You know, just stuff like that. But you should see high usage of that kind of stuff. And Vampiric Blood's another one. It's a 1-minute CD. Again, there's lots of buttons for Decays to push, and you could get into a lot of this stuff. But anywho, you see sort of the Blood Shields, the active mitigation. Take a look at that stuff. Bone Shield, Vampiric Blood, Anti-Magic Shell, all these minor CDs. Make sure those are there. And then Icebound Fortitude is that major CD. And make sure that's being used more in the fight. So, here's a log. Decays. Yay. Alright. And so finally, don't want to bore you with a ton of different things, but I thought I'd mention Warriors too, because I'd learned a little bit more about Warriors in the past few weeks. So, active mitigation for Warriors is Shield Block and Barrier. You know, they can choose to use it on blocking attacks, melee attacks, or absorbing a bunch of damage. And you should see some pretty high usage. A Warriors thing will look like this, where you've got Shield Block stuff and Shield Barrier. They're very short, kind of bursty type thingies here, so I know bursty's not the right word, but you see what I mean. It's going to be little scattered blips where they're using block and barrier. And then, you know, there's Shield Wall being their 3-minute cooldown, reducing all damage taken, etc., etc. So that, you know, on this 6.5-minute fight, it was used 3 times. Cool beans. That's good stuff. And there's a lot more that you can evaluate with Warriors here. But so that's, you know, sort of the hacking into the logs and sort of taking a look at what you can find out from World of Logs. A lot of information there. I don't know much about bear tanks. You know, someone else can post about that, what to look for in those things. You know, there's lots of information on bears and whatnot. Likewise, monks. Monks are the new hotness or whatever. There's a lot of stuff about different builds and what you should be looking for monks. But at the very least, sort of you can boil it down to look at active mitigation. Is it looking like an appropriate uptime for their active mitigation, whatever that means? Minor cooldowns, are those being rotated through? And then major cooldowns, are those being used in the right places? So that's what you can look at for World of Logs, and there you go. So, one other piece that you can look at in World of Logs, and we will not go into this too much because of what I did in the previous show, but you can also take a look at the death logs and say, okay, tank died here on this wipe, and obviously this is more relevant to a wipe than it is for a kill, but tank died here on this wipe, and he was the first to die, so it wasn't like, you know, a wipe was already called because 3 DPS were down, but the tank died in this, and we don't know why. You can take a look at death logs. You can go, okay, I took a hit from the boss, took a hit from this ad, and they didn't get any healing for 7 seconds. That's why they died. Or, you know, there's a lot of information in death logs and whatnot. And there's also some add-ons for that too. So I won't go into all of that because we did a little bit before, but death logs are going to be one of those good tools to look at when the tanks say, oh, I wasn't getting enough heals, and the healers say, well, he just went from 100% to 0 and nothing flat. What was I supposed to do? So take a look at those if that's the argument you're having at that moment with, evaluating your tank. So there's that. So speaking of healers, that's point number 2 in this episode is talk to your healers, because it's their job to keep everyone alive, and they know who's hard to heal. They know who's hard to heal throughout your raid group. So they know that the hunter is really hard to heal because he ends up in the wrong place, or he's standing in a fire, or know that the other healer is really tough to heal because he gets too focused and ends up standing in the wrong place or whatever. But more than anything, the person they're usually healing the most is the tanks, so they can tell you, are they hard to heal? Is the tank hard to heal? Ask them. They know. You may think they don't know, but they know. They know who they're clicking their little button on to heal or put a shield on or do whatever. So ask them, and you have to sort out the exaggeration from the fact, of course, but you're going to get a sense of, well, main tank is easier to heal than off tank guy, or however you want to designate main tank, off tank. These days there's 2 main tanks because we're taunt swapping it for a debuff. Anyway, that's another deal. But they'll know who is better at using active mitigation, cooldowns, etc., because they'll be like, oh yeah, so-and-so really doesn't take any damage at all, but we have a lot of problems with this guy, or whatever. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they say, no, really, both of the tanks are pretty even, and there's not really a problem with one or the other. So hopefully that's what you hear, because that's a good situation. You got both tanks, they're both survivable, etc., etc. So ask your healers. They'll know. Have a conversation. You'll get some answers. You'll get some information at least. So now comes the more fluffy part of this conversation. And that is talking about the intangibles of tanking. There's, like I said, someone who could stand in front of the boss and be very survivable, but be very poor at responding to raid mechanics, or picking up ads, or holding aggro on the boss on the pull, or just stuff like that. So these are what I call that intangible factor of a tank. Are they good at tanking, essentially? Are they good at doing their job? And this conversation could also apply to all of your raid roles. I mean, are your ranged DPS good at doing their DPS thing, but are they also good at standing in the void zone or not standing in the void zone when they're supposed to, or doing over here, or picking up these ads and picking them apart quickly, switching targets? This applies to all of your raid group. But tanking in particular has sort of some set things that you really want to make sure your tanks are doing, or at least that you feel like they're good at. And here we go. So I've already mentioned a couple things. One of them is sort of the speed of being able to pick up aggro or pick up ads that are adding to a fight. So think Galacross in Siege of Orgrimmar. I've talked about Galacross like a bunch in the last day. I don't know why. But it seems to be just a good example fight about picking up stuff and doing some good tanking. But ads are coming down the middle. Is your tank picking them up? Maybe your DPS, my Hunter's raid group, is really bad about just blowing up stuff as quickly as possible. I get the complaint about the DPS from the tanks. Anyway, they want to get it hopping on DPS, and you kind of actually need a tank to be able to pick up stuff quickly, hold it, and not let anything loose. If something gets loose, there are some ways to get around it. People feign death, all that other jazz, but you really want to be able to have your DPS going full bore on new targets as soon as possible. You don't want to wait 30 seconds to even put a dot up or whatever. So speed of picking up ads and speed of sort of aggro gaining is a good thing. You'll be able to know that from people. DPS dies on a pull. Well, they didn't get the aggro quick enough. Again, DPS can, there's a little give and take there. As a hunter, I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'll misdirect. I don't have aggro problems, whatever. LT play, something like that. But you can know how your tank is doing, even without DPS dying. So, speed of picking up ads, aggro, losing aggro. These day and ages, they made it fairly simple for tanks to sort of pick up stuff, and they have so much threat that they should at the pull and whatnot. So that shouldn't be something that you're dealing with, but maybe it is. Then another intangible factor would be, are they using their utility abilities? Are they helping the raid out not just by holding the boss and doing some damage, being in the right place, but are they giving some utility to the raid? So good examples would be sort of maybe raid CDs is one. So are they popping the raid CDs when they're called for, for warriors, rallying cry, or devotion aura for paladins, etc., etc. Those are sort of bigger fish. But there's minor things. There's like paladins, hands of sacrifice. So are your paladins using paladin? Say your paladin tank is off tanking and sees that the other tank is taking a bunch of damage. Use a hand of sacrifice on them. Redirect the damage, which actually you can glyph it to not have that redirection happen, but just things like that. Are they using some raid utility to help out your raid? Warriors have intervened, and Decays have their bubble and the rune tap and all that other stuff. So are they using some of that raid utility to help your raid down raid bosses? So look for that. Again, you might just be able to say yes they are, no they aren't, but look for those types of things. Go, hey, I just saw he dropped his mocking banner and all the ads came to him on Shot of Pride or something. That's pretty neat. We didn't have to worry about aggro. Stuff like that. So there's that. And then speaking of raid mechanics, your tanks it's an unfair position to be in, but your tanks really have to be one of the first people to sort of pick up raid mechanics and lock them in. So they really have to be one of the first people to sort of get the fight. And if you're not having that, if you're having a lot of tank problems after, X amount of pulls, I'm not going to say a number, but just if you feel like tanking problems are still why you're not downing a fight after quite a while, then you're getting kind of sketchy, because tank stuff should be fairly regular. It's pick up this guy who just came down, go get this ad over here, move it to here, do. And that sort of sets the tone for the rest of the raid. Okay, if the tank does all of those things, then all the rest of us need to learn, okay, healers in range got to be over here, meta's got to be here, we got to DPS this ad, and all of that sort of flows. So they sort of set that tone with raid positioning and, responding to raid mechanics. So again, it's an intangible thing. I can't give you a, exact scale of good, very good, bad, whatever, but one of those intangible things to think about when you're evaluating a tank or trying to help them out on what they might need to work on. So adaptability to raid mechanics, check it out. So that's, a few of the intangibles, and, that's about, there's lots more. There's a lot of things where people are want to evaluate tanks and say whether one is better than the other. But just really, World of Logs will point out sort of cooldown usage and how hard are they to heal. You'll find more out about that if you talk to your healers. And then figure out how good are they at doing their role, because all that together is a tank. So, Anywho, that's about it for today. So it's been Overrated episode 6, talking about raiding tanks. And don't have any cats. I have squirrels on my shirt. So maybe that. It says Squirrels Gone Wild. It's an awesome t-shirt. Anyway, that has to substitute for cats. I'm sorry. They're not around. I don't even see any in the room. What's this? I have a bunch of cats. Why don't I have any? Anywho, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. And see you next time on Overrated. This is your pal, Pallie. Have a good one.